So welcome back to another training vlog. This is basically the first session in a long time, so following on from last year's series of training, took a bit of time off, then I've been hit with some sort of gypsy's curse. I've had staph twice, I've had COVID, I've popped my elbow, and most recently I've torn my hamstring. And I injured my back as well. So this is the first session back to proper training in a long time. This is going to be some power cleans, some jumps, and some kind of very controlled squats. What I'm putting on here is my brand new pair of ancient, ragged, worn out weightlifting shoes, and I absolutely love them. These are adistars 2008s. I've been looking for a pair of these for the last 5 years, probably since 2008 to be honest. I love these shoes. They're very hard to come by. I got these from the Uplift store. So Kyle and Izzy in Australia, they basically started selling vintage weightlifting shoes and general weightlifting gear. They're very good to deal with. If you're looking for a pair of shoes like this, it's a great place to go and find a pair. I'm delighted with how worn they are, so they were quite concerned and sent me a few different pictures of the shoes, making sure I knew exactly what kind of condition they were in. But I love these. So this is moving on to my warm-up now. The same warm-up I've done for basically every barbell workout ever. So some RDLs, some bent over rows, some strict presses, and then either back squats or front squats at the end of it. Putting on the shoes for the first time, those 2008s feel very similar to the kind of original Addy Powers that I would have had in a very early the early part of my weightlifting training. So I really like them. They're a much kind of more free shoe. You don't feel as rooted to the ground in them as you would with like a Nike or with an Anta. And now just moving on to some power cleans. So I have a disgracefully bad front rack position. That's just what happens from too much jiu-jitsu and not enough front squatting or lifting weights in general for 5 or 6 months. So all I'm doing here, just concentrating on getting warm, getting my heart rate up. You would have seen some of those little jogs at the start. That's just all getting my core body temperature up a bit more. As I get older, unfortunately, I'm going to have to admit defeat and start warming up properly for training instead of just putting my shoes on and starting to lift. And that's as depressing as anything else really could be. One thing I really like as I'm warming up and trying to improve my front rack position is when I'm strict pressing, I try and force my elbows out in front as the barbell comes back down into position. I think this gives a really nice eccentric loading of that front rack position and just allows you to force the front rack a bit more. So you'll see here on these front squats that is not a great position, but it'll get better over the course of the next few reps. And by the time we get onto the power cleans, it's respectable enough. So there's 3 cues I'm really looking for these cleans or power cleans, and to be honest, they're the same cues I've been really focused on for the last 5 years of weightlifting, to be honest, or 5 years of training. The first one is that during the first pull, I need to make sure the barbell isn't welded into my shins and I'm not going to push it away from my shins as I start pulling off the floor. The second one is I'm focusing on not extending too much or not over pulling the bar, and I bring in bar contact into this as well, so I don't want to smash the bar with my hips. And then the third one will be being as aggressive as possible with pulling under. So because this is the first time I've done cleans or any weightlifting in a long time, you'll see prior to the sets themselves, I just stand over the bar for a long time. I try and load my head with those 3 cues, and then I'm just focusing on those. So feeling a bit tight as I turn the barbell over, but overall feels quite good. These feel quite fast, so I'm pretty happy with them now at this point. The plan for today is around 20 singles on the power clean, just really focusing on the technique for each one, trying to be as aggressive as possible with that pull under, and then just making sure my positions aren't terrible. As I'm going through these singles, I don't really take much rest in between each one at all, maybe around a minute, and doing them in kind of sets of 2 or 3. I'm really feeling out my hamstring as well, just seeing how it feels. It starts to kind of swell up towards the end of the session, but overall everything is going quite well at this point. The shoes feel great. So in between the sets then, I'm just doing some vertical jumps, just again feeling out the hamstring, seeing how it's going. These are not the best of vertical jumps, to be honest, certainly not the best I've done, but overall they're pretty okay. Touching the rim is an alright place to start training with. Then just adding a small bit of weight. So I ended up doing around 20 singles at 60 kilos, probably around 8 to 10 singles at 80 kilos. This is the last single here, and it's basically just throwing the barbell into the rack and moving on to back squats now. So this is the first set of back squats. Because of my hamstring, I start to get some pain as I kind of rebound out of the bottom position. So there's no real bounce here, but even just that stopping point and coming back up out of the bottom position, start to feel it in my kind of medial hamstring in towards my adductor. So I make the decision now to go to a kind of low box squat. To be honest, at this point of training, it makes no real difference if they're box squats or not. So this is a good opportunity just to add them back in, force my upright torso position, force myself to be very knees forward, and it just allows me to control a bit more of the kind of variables of training, particularly in an injury rehab context. It really helps just to be able to put a few constraints in place, make sure you're moving as you want to be moving, and not move in poor positions for longer than you would have to. So what you'll also see here is my toes are very straightforward. So I like a straightforward toe position and not too wide of a stance. This really helps me to kind of activate my quads or focus on my quads during the squat. One thing I don't like about these squats is just how wide I have to go with my hands. So as I mentioned earlier, a little elbow owie a few weeks ago, or a month and a bit ago at this point, means I just can't take a normal width grip on the barbell. So I just false grip, allow myself to be overly extended at the wrist, and I kind of just sit the bar on top of my shoulders here rather than being very active with it. So this is a position I don't like. I don't like athletes to be there. I don't like being there myself, but at the moment, needs must, and it kind of just allows me to be quite secure with the bar on my shoulders, but not forcing that position, because the barbell back squat position for your elbow is basically the same as an Americana, and that was the offending article for my elbow. So to finish the session then, just some light stretching. I really like this stretch for my lats and for my pecs. So what I do is I tend to push out to the side. So if it's my left elbow or my left arm holding on, I'll push my left hip out towards the wall. Then as I go through the second round of it, I'll kind of just push forward. So I'm focusing on pushing my chest forward towards the wall in front of me, just hanging in that position. I then just focused on a small bit of hamstring stretching, small bit of pigeon stretch at the end, loosened my hamstrings and hips up a small bit more, and yeah, that was a nice first session back.
If you're interested in squatting, head over to seekastrength.com. It'll be linked below to get our Road to Anywhere squat program, which is now famous or infamous depending on how many times you've run it. We've had people run the program up to 5 different times, an average of 2 to 3 times for most users, as they get a lot of benefit from the program. It is 2 sessions per week, 8 weeks in length, and we've seen anywhere from 25 kilos up to 45 kilo PBs on the program, and we highly recommend it. It is tough, but it is well worth the value you get from the program.